You're listening to episode 47 of the Business Building Rockstars Show.
You're listening to the Business Building Rockstars Show, where your host, Nicole Holland, gets the lowdown from today's most talented, inspiring, and successful entrepreneurs on what it really takes to reach rockstar status.
Do you want to get your message out in a bigger way by being a guest on a web show or podcast just like this? If you do, text the letters I am ready to 33444 and I will send you free of charge a guide called How to Be a Great Guest. Don't make rookie mistakes that so many people do when they're starting out. Get known as a great guest that hosts search for free by texting I am ready to 33444. So to spell that out, it's the letters I am READY to 33444 and I will send you a complimentary copy of my guide, How to Be a Great Guest. My guest today is Faydra Koenig, and she is thriving despite unimaginable circumstances. During our interview, we talk about how to manage crisis in different capacities. Faydra shares about her traumatic childhood and how she is able to self-soothe despite all the haters. Now, this episode does involve some explicit language and topics, so please, if you have children in the vicinity, it's not the right interview to listen to right now. And with that, we're going to jump right in. Hey there, entrepreneur. Welcome to the Business Building Rockstars Show. Nicole Holland here. I'm your host, and today I'm hanging out with Faydra Koenig. She is the Amazon best-selling author, host of the new and noteworthy podcast Coming Out of the Fire, lover of Starbucks, and the television show Scandal. Faydra is determined that no one facing a crisis feel alone. Known in pop culture as America's crisis coach, Faydra interviews high achievers who have faced unimaginable obstacles and have come out on top. Her bold approach to crisis management is out of the box and it's changing lives. And it's such an honor to have you here, Faydra. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, Nicole, I am so thrilled to be here. I've been waiting to be on your show.
Yay! I know we've kind of crossed paths for quite some time, and it's nice to finally get this going. So
I know we both had such busy schedules. It's amazing to have so many wonderful guests trying to be on each other's show, and it just finally found some time when we could be together.
Totally. So why don't you let my listeners know a little bit more about what you do and how you help and serve your clients?
Okay. Basically, I come alongside people going through the worst times of their lives. And what I say is sometimes life sucks. I make it suck less. So my specialty is crisis management. My background is all in the fields of psychology. I worked for 22 years. I guess we're going into 23 years now in the fields of mental health, social work, family court services, and as a court investigator. So I've worked with thousands and thousands of people over the years who have been going through all different sorts of crisis. And I went through my own crisis about 3.5 years ago that for me was unimaginable. And it really brought me to the end of what I knew, even though I had all these tools and I had to dig really deep and figure things out. And when I did, I just was more passionate than ever to really be a resource to people who feel like they're all alone and suffering. And I know that they don't need to feel that way. So I ramped up my business and rebranded. I used to be known in the divorce niche. That was really my focus. And I widened it to encompass all these areas of crisis that I have helped people in the past and want to help people with now. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing.
Yeah, thank you. That's so interesting. And I love that you've spent so many years and so much time helping people through crisis in different capacities and that you're so passionate about continuing that. I actually used to specialize in that too. You talk about going from divorce into crisis in general, like a wider range of crises. And for me, I worked with youth and families in crisis for many years, specifically the children and youth, not so much the parents, but there were times that I worked with the parents. And as my journey went twisty-turny all different kinds of ways. By the end, when I had my own crisis and decided to quit my job and start my business over, what I knew to do was youth and family coaching. And it was the last thing I wanted to do. I was like, I don't want to talk about crisis. I don't want to think about crisis. I want to deal with happy people. And it's so hard a lot of times when we go through our own shit to be able to be like, yes, I still want to be there for you. So I just applaud you and I love you. And I think it's just so incredible that through your own crises, you're still even, well, I wouldn't say still, but you're like more determined and motivated to help people going through crisis of their own. So
well, I think I was a lot like you. I was fairly burned out and just kind of over it. And I think that's why I planted myself in the divorce niche, because I knew it really, really well. And I was attacking it from a position that most people weren't. And so that was fun for me. And when I was going through my own stuff, it really, really was taxing. It really was bigger than I knew how to manage. And coming through that fire, so to speak, pun for my podcast, coming through that fire and recognizing that I felt so alone. And part of that aloneness was some shame. It was some voodoo that was put on me. And it was pretty traumatic. And I realized that I didn't necessarily want to help people in this low level malaise of crisis. My hope and my drive really is to work with people going through high end types of crisis. And what I find that's kind of interesting is I don't have a lot of capacity to coddle people who think, oh, I'm going through this situation. And by comparison, it's not that great in magnitude. So I definitely see that I am better and more helpful helping people who are going through what we call the unimaginable or critical crisis versus just kind of that everyday, I don't know, I'm just kind of unhappy in life. Like that's really difficult for me. But if somebody's going through literally the worst thing they've ever faced, that's when I'm at my best. When they're at their worst, I'm at my best. And it's all about just solving problems and then assessing the psychology of where they are. It's like kind of like triage first, right? Solve any immediate problems and then assess the mindset and where people are in their head, and then show them the tools that I know about and connect them to the people that I'm connected to help them get to the other side. And the biggest, most rewarding part of that is most of the people, when they get to the other side, they've got this motivation to do stuff with what they've been through. And so they either want to write a book or they want to become a speaker or they want to start a foundation. And that's when it gets really good, because I work with wonderful people like you and all the people that you and I know. And I have colleagues in all these different areas, and I can plug them into those people. And that's when their mess becomes a message. And that's when it really comes full circle for me, because I see that they're at the lowest of the low, but I know where it can go. And I've walked a bit before them. And when I see them get to that place, it makes my own shit worth it. And it helps them see that their shit can be worth it too.
So cool. I love that. So let's go back like way, way, way back. I want to take you back to the time like shortly after you were able to talk and walk and before you were learning what was not possible in life. What did you want to be when you were a really little kid?
I wanted to be two things. I wanted to be an airline stewardess and an attorney.
Oh, interesting. Very cool. And what did your studies or like, what was that next step when you actually decided that you were going to go get a job? Did you go straight into social services and mental health, or did you ever become an airline stewardess?
So what's interesting is my childhood was really traumatic, and I lived in a house of horrors literally all my childhood. So from the time that I was 3 until I was 13, I was being seriously sexually, emotionally, and physically abused. So I was living hand to mouth as a kiddo, and I didn't have a lot of great social skills. I didn't have any parenting. I was kind of like a feral kid, but I had a real high intellect. I mean, I have a Mensa level intellect, which is really cool. And I think it saved my bacon when I was younger because I took to reading, and I learned a lot about life through reading. Now, for me, what motivated me was back in my mind, I put 2 and 2 together that people who had great jobs had air conditioning, because I was living in a house with no central heater air, I guess we had fans, but there was no swamp coolers, no nothing. And I lived in a place where it got to be 117 in the summers. So I was very motivated by that. So I lived in rural Northern California. And really the only opportunities up there were like county positions or working for the government somehow or working in like police, something like that. So I went to college as an English major, surprise, because I was a reader and a writer. And I went to my very first psychology class where I learned so much about myself and the dysfunction in my family that it just was a game changer. So I went to school, switched my major up into psychology, went all the way through my master's, and my goal was to get a social work job because those were the jobs that had benefits, paid vacation, paid sick leave, and I could have a family. So that was very, very specifically a path that I took at that time.
Cool. Makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people can relate to that and just wanting that security and peace of mind and something really concrete. So when was it that you decided that maybe that normal path wasn't yours and you wanted to do something on your own?
Well, what I noticed was that even though I was working in the infrastructure that had parameters for me as an employee, I realized that I was a natural born entrepreneur and I started to carve out ways for me to be within that infrastructure, but still have a lot of the freedoms that I loved. So my main job for a number of years was basically driving up and down the state of California, checking on people who were in locked facilities for the mentally disabled and making sure that they still needed to be there. Because one of the things I loved about our county and at the time California was we didn't keep people locked up for no good reason. So I loved the freedom to be able to drive around and kind of be my own woman and find new facilities and help get contracts going and check on people. It was very rewarding. And I listened to a lot of books on tape back then. I had a lot of free time in the car doing this sort of thing. And I started to realize that I wanted to do more. I started blogging before blogging was a thing. It was more like an electronic diary. And consequently, I was going through a pretty radical divorce at the time. So I was blogging about that. And I noticed that I was getting a lot of traction. I didn't really know what that was. I didn't think anybody really had a plan for what blogging was supposed to be. But it became a thing for me and I started to get recognition. And that's when the social world started to pay attention to me. And I realized that I had something there. And I ended up in a situation where I had like 3 different contracts. I was a court investigator. I was a writer for answers.com. I was writing for myself and I was doing some speaking. So I was able to carve out this way to have the job, but also to expand and start to explore what other opportunities might be out there for me.
Interesting. That's awesome. And so at what point then did you decide, after you've explored all these different opportunities, to leave your job and start really full on embracing entrepreneurship?
So there are a couple of things that happened along the way. I had hit the glass ceiling in my government job and really couldn't go any farther I couldn't earn any more money. And that was not acceptable to me. And so I took a position as the administrator of a housing facility. And so what that meant was that I had this apartment complex that I was responsible for. And inside the complex was a program. It's where we house people who could be in the community versus being in those locked facilities that I was talking about. And the cool thing about that was I had my own apartment as part of my office. And so because I was the administrator, I was no longer bound by this 8 to 5. I was responsible for it 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. But nobody was looking at my butt in a seat. And that was kind of the beginning because I was able to write and actually start doing coaching and doing some other things from that location. I had the freedom to come and go, and I had structured my staff to where the show ran itself and I was more about oversight. So that was my first step. And then I really went full time after my big situation 3.5 years ago. I realized that socially I was going through a lot of trauma. And one of the things that happened is that I got let go from my court investigator's job. And it was actually by default that I ended up as a full-time entrepreneur because I was so humiliated by what I had been through that I thought I was unemployable. And when you think that you have no choices, you dig a little bit deeper in what you've got right in front of you. And what I had right in front of me was this business that I had been doing as a labor of love. And if it monetized, that was awesome, but I wasn't driven by the monetization. But now I am more driven in that way. And it's really paid off because I charge the fees that I deserve because I bring a lot to the table and my confidence is different. And I've also been able to branch out because a lot of coaches now are asking me to teach them how I coach the way I coach because it's very different than what people are being taught in their certification program. So for me, it's opened up a lot of opportunities, but it took those steps, leaving that job security and then finally getting shoved out of the nest for it to become my full-time gig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you referred to this crisis 3.5 years ago a few times. Can we dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, so most of the people who know me as America's crisis coach, they may or may not have been to my website, which is doinglifewithfaydra.com. And there's a video there that really tells my story, but I'll give you the elevator pitch. It's a crazy making story that you would see on 2020. But back about 8 years ago, I had been single for a long time and finally opened up my heart to the idea of dating. And I met somebody and we clicked right away. And he was a very prominent businessman. He was just a really amazing man. And our families clicked and things were going great. But unbeknownst to me, at the moment, he was going through something really traumatic legally. And this is back, and it's very highly political. It's back when our current governor, was actually running for that office. And he indicted over 100 people in the state for various white collar crimes. And my now husband was one of those people. And he spent many years trying to prove that he didn't do anything wrong. And the government just kept ramping up and ramping up. And generally what you do is you settle out of court and you try to move on with your life. And my husband wasn't willing to do that. He had 6 children. He had a legacy. He had a reputation that he wanted whole and intact. And so they put him in jail for 2.5 years trying to force him to take a deal. He wouldn't do that. They had to let him out to prepare for a trial. He went to trial, and along the way, they literally took everything away from him. They took his livelihood. They took his home. They took his reputation, all of his sources of income. They took away his attorneys, and he was left with a public defender. So a very, very highly complicated accusation, very highly complicated criminal process, and a very long trial. And he ultimately was convicted, and then it got worse. They decided to make an example of him, and he was 60 years old at the time, and they sent him away for 43 years. So he's been gone for almost 4 years now. And when it happened, unfortunately, I became collateral damage, and all the hate and all the media and all that attention that the trial had garnered all fell down in my lap. And it was really painful because I worked for the same courthouse as an investigator as where all this was held. And so the judges were like, get her out of here, because there was just too much attention on everything. And it was devastating because I had never had anything other than a stellar reputation there. It was all political. And, we are in the appeal process. We filed this year. I feel super confident about it. And to be able to talk about it like I talk about it now is such a product of my podcast and my ability to actually share my story and not get the rejection that I had been getting and continued to think everybody was going to give me. And luckily, it's actually become an opportunity for me to be a spokesperson for a lot of people out there like me that I didn't even know existed. And that was part of why I struggled so much, because I didn't know anybody who had been through anything like I had, and nobody in my friend sphere knew what to do. They were all just like, Faydra, I don't know how you're going to get through this. I don't know what you're going to do. And it was really, really traumatic. And I'm so glad to say that I've worked it through and we're working it out, and we don't know where it's headed, but we know that I'm not looking at suicide as one of my available options anymore. So I say that's a damn good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned not looking at suicide as an option anymore. And I think that it's important to point out, when life gives us what it gives us and it's unexpected and it's pretty overwhelming to where you don't think you can get out of it and you do consider suicide. What for you personally, what was that thing that got you through that point in time to the point in time where you thought, wait a minute, it's not time to give up. I've got other options.
I'm so glad you asked. That is the heart of my podcast. That is the thing that we park on when people come on and tell their stories. And I'm telling you, I have had some amazing people come on with some really what I call batshit crazy stories. And here's the deal. There is no crisis Kool-Aid. There is no magic pill. What I did was a small, simple thing, and then I did the next small, simple thing. Now, the problem that I created for myself is that I went completely within and I completely cut myself off. I did what I had to do to support my kids and to be in the world. But other than that, I was so covered in the shame that was put on me. And we've heard that term, shame on you. And we don't realize that that's like a voodoo. It's like this heavy, wet, nasty blanket someone throws over you, and you're like, I didn't put this here, but I'm being forced to wear it. And I didn't know how to get out of that. And my eyesight got so narrowed that I couldn't see anymore a bigger picture, let alone an aerial view. So the thing that made the difference for me was to get into community. And I went to an event, and it was my last ditch effort. It was kind of like, if I go to this and these people don't have an answer, I'm going to have to get really serious about what my options are. So I went to a beach retreat with these amazing women, entrepreneurial women, and I told my story. And I was snot crying and heaving and shaking and so ready for them to reject me or distance themselves from me. And it was the total opposite. Absolutely the total opposite. So by sharing my story and being vulnerable and allowing them to mirror back what they saw in me, which reminded me of who I always believed I was and who I had been prior to being told I was something different. It made all the difference. And I won't say that life got better instantly because it didn't, but it gave me the courage. I could borrow their courage while I was redeveloping my own. And then I could go home and start taking these tiny, small steps and making the best of the available choices, because sometimes the choices weren't ideal, but I could make the best of what was there. And slowly but surely it got better and better. And when you see my video, that's an example of one of my big steps, because part of the problem I was facing was a lot of people kept sending me hate mail and death threats saying, wait till people find out about you, wait till this, wait till that. So I put the big white elephant under a spotlight and said, here's my crap. Here's what I'm living with, but here's who I am. If you don't like me after you've heard all the facts, I'm not obligated to accept your hate. And that power started to come back to me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love how you were able to turn it around, and something, definitely listeners, this is a takeaway. Tiny steps, taking the best option at the time, because, you may think, well, I want it this way, and maybe that way is not available to you right now. So what can you do to take a tiny step in the direction of that, what you want? And I love that you were able to do that and that you're able to share about that with your community and right now with my listeners. And let me ask you, so you mentioned a video. I know that putting it out there, what you're going through, has been very empowering for you. But I'd like to know from a interpersonal, just for you, from a personal perspective, other than when you share it with your community, when you get something like hate mail or death threats, what is it that you do to self-soothe first and foremost that's helping you the most?
One of the things that has been a great benefit for me is this walk really has brought me so close to God. And I was what they called a fence sitter. And watching my husband go through this and never lose his faith and keep this even ability to be in the world under the most horrible of situations, it was a great witness to me. And so I was able to dig deeper. So when the hate mail comes, which is incidentally, I just got a letter about 3 weeks ago, and the grand invitation was there again, because this hate is just very, very specific and very cruel. I had the grand invitation to say, why am I keep putting myself out there? If I just evaporated, maybe it would go away. One of the things that they said that they were going to do, I relocated in June. I moved away from Northern California after 46 years of living there and moved to Sacramento. And one of the things that this person said is, I'm going to write a letter to everyone in the neighborhood saying who you are and how disgusting you are, and I'm going to make sure you get driven out. I mean, when you have that hanging over your head, it's powerfully, powerfully paralyzing. So for self-soothing, what I ended up doing was going to my Facebook Live and my community and just being real and raw about what was in it. And it took the power away. And it wasn't because I was seeking attention. It was because I wanted to say, I'm not going to suffer this in private hell. I'm going to put light on this, and I'm going to pray over this. And I'm going to ask my community who knows me, who knows everything about me, my flaws and my wonderful attributes, to be in this with me. So for me, in this place that I'm in right now, that is one step. The other is I just continue to love myself. And I actually, this sounds so cliche, but I pray for that person, because hurting people hurt other people. And I used to be a real bitch of a girl. I mean, when I came out of that childhood that I was in, I had a big chip on my shoulder and I had a lot to learn. And going through this that I have at this magnitude, it has made me so humble and so willing to meet people where they are. So I'm trying to meet that hate where it is and saying it has no power over me, and that what's driving that person is their own demons, and I don't have to agree with it. So it's a combination of things, but again, they're just small little things.
That's amazing. Do you have any kind of daily rituals or anything that's helping you stay playing at the level that you're playing at?
I would say that my tendency to be very organized and very clean is super helpful. And some people might look at my life and say, wow, it's really structured. But the structure is what creates the ability for me to be spontaneous. I'm an empty nester. I'm living alone. I live about less than a mile from my daughter. And because of that, if someone called me and said, hey, there's a speaking opportunity for you, could you get here in a few days? I know I could do it because I have my life so organized that I could pick up and go. and nothing's really going to fall apart and I don't have to scramble. So that in and of itself is great. The other thing is I take really good care of my body. I suffer from PCOS, which is a hormone disorder. So my body wants to hold on to fat no matter what I do. I eat really clean and really healthy, and that helps my mind stay super focused. So I can show up on podcasts, I can fill in, I can do all these great things because my mind is always fed well with my nutrition and my exercise. And that also helps me with keeping off any kind of depression or, anything that might want to creep into my head, that self-loathing or you can't do it or they're not going to accept you, all that. I can stave that off because when we run or we get our heart rate up, we release natural endorphins in our head that help us stave off any type of depression. So I would say being organized, clean, tidy, taking good care of myself are my key things that I do.
Very nice. And is there anybody who's specifically been a mentor in your life that stands out?
I've had a few. I'm a huge fan of Dareth Chisholm. She has a wonderful show. I just love her as a person. I think she's remarkable. I am a fan of a lot of podcasts. I would say what's really helping me right now is I have spent a lot of money in my career, especially in the last 4 years, really learning for myself, right? Getting certain types of coaching and understanding technology or understanding marketing and things like that. And what's really cool for me right now is freely, for no cost, mentoring other people and just giving them that brain trust. That has been really helpful for me. And they end up mentoring me back because somebody always knows something, right? And I get to get the benefit of giving that forward, but then also receiving it back. So that's a big thing that's working for me right now too.
Fantastic. So Faydra, why don't you let everybody know again where they can reach you and how to find your show and all that good stuff?
Thank you. So the best way to reach me is at doinglifewithfaydra.com. I have a contact me form at the bottom of every page. So if you wanted to shoot me an email, that's a great way to do it. But I also love to get you into the Brave Nation. And one of the ways that you can do that is to go to crisiscrusher.com. It is my freebie for people who listen to me on podcasts. So you get information that I don't share with the regular world. And it's pretty cool. It's a series of downloads. It's some videos and it's some audios. And it's going to help you face a crisis if you're in one right now or be prepared for a crisis because oftentimes it's just a matter of time. So that's one way that I love to spread the love. I'm also really active on Facebook. It's my favorite social media platform. You can find me personally at Faydra Koenig. You can also find me on my fan page at Faydra Koenig, and I'd love to engage with you there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, make sure to subscribe on iTunes so that you don't miss another episode. And if you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. And if you want to catch up on past episodes, it's super easy to do when you subscribe on iTunes. Also, we're on Stitcher, and of course, you can visit bbrshow.com for all of the episodes, show notes, and more. I would love to hear what you think about today's episode by leaving a review on iTunes, or also you can go to bbrshow.com, and on our show notes page, there is a comment section. Dear listeners, I do this show for you, so the more you let me know what you love, the more I can bring you that. Don't forget that the Business Building Rockstar Show releases every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So 3 times per week, you can listen in to what the journey towards rockstar status entrepreneurship is really like. Until next time, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I look forward to connecting again real soon.
And there you have it. If you enjoyed this episode of the Business Building Rockstars Show, be sure to subscribe on iTunes so you don't miss a thing. And visit bbrshow.com for all the show notes and links to resources discussed on today's show. Plus, lots more.